Hi, ladies. Welcome to another self-love conversation. My name is Gloria Ward, and you know that each and every Tuesday and Thursday, we try to bring you some great conversations with some amazing women who overcame and became. And tonight, we're going to be talking to Katherine, who is a sexual assault survivor. She is a storyteller, she's a writer, she is an overcomer, and she's just an all-around amazing woman that when I read her bio, I was like, this is definitely a person that we want to talk to. So, Katherine, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. You're so sweet. Want me to bless you?
Yeah, we do this at the I'm Loving Me Project because we want to be able to allow women to understand and know what their true worth is, right? A lot of us go around each and every day trying to figure out who we are. And the biggest thing that we do is we walk around with all these masks on.
Mm-hmm.
We're mothers, we're friends, we got to be, colleagues and workers and all this stuff. And when you really get down to it, you try to figure out who you are, right? And one of the things that resonated with me is that you said that you thought you was going to do one thing, but you ended up doing something else in your life. So just give us a little overview of your story and how did you get to this point in your life?
Okay, this question. A little bit of an overview. So I'm from a little town called Albany, in Albany, Georgia.
Mhm.
2012, I graduated high school with the full intention of coming to Howard University in DC and majoring in biology and eventually going to medical school. And so that was like May. Fast forward to fall semester, November 2nd, 2012, which is like smack dead in the middle of my first semester there. Uh, sorry, excuse me, a serial rapist broke into my dorm and attacked me. And that was, November 2nd, 2012. And then about a week or so later, my mom had me back home, surrounded by like family and familiar things. And before I left to come back, so I was in Georgia time before we left to come back like a day or so later. She's like, "We're going to church," and so in the middle of service, which is this like Baptist church in the South, full of Black people, and my
Yeah.
grandmother picks up on the microphone and she's like doing like testimony part. She's like, "I just want to thank the Lord, for my baby, and she was raped last week, but she's here to tell the story, mind you."
Grandma.
like, I was like, "Lord."
Grandma.
I was holding my mom had like become godmom to somebody's baby, and she was like, "Here, hold the baby." So I'm just holding the baby, and then the whole church turns around and looks at me, and everyone had on like muted colors. I had on like a bright orange sweater, and everyone like turns around, looks at me. I'm just like, "Okay." I couldn't even, like, if I could drive and the parking lot wasn't packed, I would have gotten out of there, but I couldn't.
Exactly.
And then
Oh my
and then the
God.
pastor was like, "Katherine, come right here to the middle of the sanctuary." I was like, "Oh God." So I come to the middle of the sanctuary, and then he instructs all the women in the church, all the Black women in the church. Well, not all black women, they're all Black, but all the women in the church to come up and like just surround me with hugs and encouraging words and such. And so in front of me, they file, and there are about 50, 60 women like in the whole church that get up, and they're of all, walks, colors, walks, shades, ages of life, and they come up to me and like it's one at a time. And then the first lady came up to me, she's like, the same thing happened to me. I never told anyone, and I'm just so glad you're okay. So glad you made it through. Let me know if you need anything, baby. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
like, wow, I'm processing a lot right now. But then it happened again and again and again, and like and I kid you know, whenever I think like one, I was like mortified that my grandmother just did this, extra mortified that I'm standing in the middle of this church and it's like all attention has no choice but to be on me. But also at the same time, besides being mortified, something else really that I still carry with me to this day what happened. And I stopped counting at around 30. Mind you, again, there were like 50, 60
Wow.
women, but them all sharing their stories like, oh, it happened to me when I was a child, or I told my family and they didn't believe me, or my mom told me not to say anything to anyone. I've never told anyone, just talking about how
Mm-hmm.
they had these experiences after my grandmother shared mine. But then, and I realized in that moment, I was like, and also besides being mortified, I was so angry just how like they caught the guy who assaulted me. So that happened on Friday. The next day, Saturday morning, I got a call from the detective like, we got him. And so I had that like privilege, and I was, fortunate enough and blessed to, be like I guess to have that justice or start that process. But these women never got that. And so when I got back to Howard, I was like, you know what, I just want to go back to my little normal life. And so that was my fall semester. In the spring, I came back, and I'm having to explain like to my teachers, well, hey, like this is why, because the school did not tell
Yeah.
none of any of my teachers. So I'm just like, yeah,
Mhm.
so like this is what happened. They're just like, oh my God. And I just got so tired of like having to tell it over and over again. And anyway, and I told my one of my advisors, I was like, hey, like I just want to come back to classes and just everything be normal and go back to what I came here for. And she was like, oh, actually, when I first applied to Howard, I applied in their College of Arts and Sciences under biology. But right before I got ready to come to college, I had been looking up their programs. I saw they had a school of communications, and I did some journalism stuff in high school. And I was like, And so I changed my major before I even left high school to journalism. But then I did a plant biotechnology workshop right before the like my fall semester started. I fell in love with biology again. I was like, okay, I'm gonna switch it back. I'm gonna switch it back. And I turned all my forms in, and that happened. And I came back. The lady in the registrar's office quit, and she never turned in. Like there was a stack of people who changed their majors and never got them changed over. So I was still in the school of communications, and that's how I found out that I was still when I was trying to go back. And they were like, "Well, considering how your class is looking at transcript and all this stuff, you're gonna have to just stay like spend a semester in the school of communications, take those classes, and then you transfer back to co-ops." After that semester, and like I taken some journalism classes, I was like, wow. And I was like, I have been still thinking of those women who were coming up to me, still thinking about what happened to me, still thinking about all the times I just had to explain myself over and over and tell that story and all the feelings that came along with that. And I was like, you know what? I had a conversation with my like now journalism advisor, and she was like, yeah, like public health is a thing. There are people like Dr. Santa Gupta exists. He's a doctor. He's a practicing musician, but he also tells stories and helps people. He's a medical commentator on CNN, and so like you can straddle that fence and work in both those worlds. And I realized that through journalism, I could tell stories in a way, my story, other people's stories, that help them in a way that getting a band-aid and going to the doctor won't. And so there I've been, and here I'll stay in journalism and working to tell people stories ever since. And so that was as far as like how I got into journalism. Also, like I said, sticking with me from what happened with those women, I was like, it. When I say anger, people say, "Oh, like you just mad because your girlfriend did this." I was pissed, still pissed at her to this day. Still anyway, but just like thinking about those women and just how much of their lives were lost or shifted or changed because of that. And there was just and they were just alone. There was just nobody else there with them. And oh God, I couldn't get out of my head. And so that I knew I wanted to do something. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know what it would look like. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. But I just know I was like, I want to help these women. And then I realized that, so I went to RAIN, I went to, like Center 909 and NSBRC, like the National Sexual Assault Victims Resource page, and that's wrong, but it's NSBRC. And I was looking at these resources, and I saw these like really staggering statistics about about women of color and how disproportionately we were affected by sexual assault. And then I thought about it in that church, the fact that I grown up with some of these women and they were looking directly at me, like grew up, and like you never know, of course, like you never know what somebody goes through, but like they told me in that one moment, and I was like, yeah, it can't just be this blanket, resource page that's on RAIN. It needs to be something targeted, and like and looking for support systems after that. I tried to go to my family. I tried to, people that were close, but I couldn't, because that's just not the way our culture handled it and talked about it. So yeah, that's, and all of that led to Survivors Instead. And so that storytelling, how I got to Survivors Instead, and yeah, everything else has just been touch and go and taking it day by day.
Well, what I was going to say, listening to your story, is that even though you didn't like the fact that your grandmother did what she did, it birthed something out of you. One,
Yeah.
right? Two, it helped you confront and bring to life what happened to you, because one of the things is you didn't ask for it. Of course, nobody asked us to be assaulted, but at the same time, it turned it turned out to be something where now you have purpose, right? You have purpose. And even though you say that, you couldn't stand grandma and pissed off and all that stuff, I think the way that the scenario happened is the way it was supposed to happen to really get you to face it and not become one of those women who was sitting in those pews. You see what I'm saying? Because most of the time, what happens is when you are sexually assaulted, you're told to be quiet. You're told to be quiet because their mom had to be quiet. You're
Mhm.
told to be quiet because their mom had to be quiet. Because in slavery days, we had to be quiet and we knew what was going on. So that's just a generational pattern that's happening. But the curse was broken when grandma got up there, right? And even though you didn't like it birthed something new, right? So my thing is, how are you though? Like this person went to jail, of course, they getting what they deserve. But what was the journey for you in your time when you were by yourself? Like, how was that healing process? Or what is that healing process if you're still in it?
Yeah, I don't think it's ever, it'll ever end. Like it'll just be, okay, like great, I'm healed. Let's move on to the next life event. It's something that, and I think this is for everybody because once some small things are all, not small thing, but once some like trauma or something happens against you that hurts you, no matter like the severity of it, it's always in the back of your mind. It's always something like you take lessons from, and you're just aware of. And you're always aware of it, going forward. You stub your toe, you're always aware of the little corners. And so
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you may
yeah,
heal from it. It may not hurt the same way that it did in that
yeah,
moment, but you're always like hyper aware of corners and like how to move, how
absolutely,
to do that. And
absolutely.
that's how I've looked at assault as well. Healing has definitely not been linear, not been linear at all. When
Hmm.
I first started, and I guess I should have backed up a little bit when I talked about how I got here. So the first time I was assaulted when I was 6 years old, and I didn't tell
Mm,
anyone
gotcha.
until I was 16 years old, and it was after I read the book Speak by Lord forgive me, I can't remember her name, but it's a book about a girl. She's goes to like the summer before high school. She goes to a party. She's sexually assaulted, and then she goes to school and she doesn't tell anyone. And then she
Yeah.
goes to school and she becomes like effectively mute. She doesn't speak to anyone. Her parents are like, I'm wondering what's going on, all this stuff. And then she ends up speaking and kind of like, explodes out of her. And
Hmm.
while I had never told anyone, it always been something that was like in the back of my mind. What my the person who assaulted me then like told me was something that I'd always carried with me. And and when I finally like told them, when I told my English teacher, the first person I ever told, and then I spoke with, I told my mom, and like we talked with my grandmother because he was her neighbor and all this stuff. And I promised myself, I was like, you know what, if not saying, not God forbid this ever happened to me again, but if something ever happens to me again and it involves my voice, I'll never like quiet it again and not say
Yeah.
anything. So when
Yeah.
this happened, like I was texting my friend. I was like, "Hey, somebody come get this." And at every moment I had, I was, cussing out the dorm director for not doing her job. I was letting people know.
Hmm.
I was letting people have it, and and I thought that was me like standing up for myself and like healing
Yeah.
and standing for power. But then it wasn't until like I started to go to therapy afterwards. I was like, my therapist, she was like, "No, you cannot curse the man on the plane out that's mad at somebody. You can't do that. You just can't."
Right.
And she was like,
Right.
I understand it may feel like, you being empowered and standing up for yourself because, you're speaking, but it's not always that. And it can be more harmful. Like it needs to be in a concentrated way. Just because like one thing happens to you doesn't mean you can just, wreak chaos in the world and say, I was
That's
hurt
just
and
like
I'm
Will Smith. Yeah, just like Will Smith, basically. Hmm.
like
Yeah.
you can't just go out the and even though sometimes you may feel like fully right and like it's understandable why you're showing up and doing what you're doing, you're still responsible for your actions. So anyway,
Absolutely.
like when I was going through healing, I didn't even realize it. Like that happened November 2nd. I went back home the following week and the week after that, I saw no, my mom was still there. before we went home, and she was like, they had given me a therapist, and I thought, I was like, I don't really want to be here. I just want to go back to school. I don't want to, like, I just, like, it happened. I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. Just let me go back and, like, resume my life, because this has just been too much as it is. She was like, Catherine, I'm just letting you know. I was like, please just let me go. She was like, okay. And then sure enough, around March or April of the next year, I went back to her. I was like, Dr. Washington, like, come on, pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. And that process with her, and it was so hard finding a rhythm, getting into, like, trying to, like, find support and, like, trying to heal first of all, because you, like, you stub your toe as a child, or you break your arm, fall, you go to your mom, you go to your parents, you go to that, those people that you trust. When this happened to me, there was nobody I could go to. There was, like, my family was right there, but it wasn't like I could talk to them. Even now, I'll be talking to my sister about it, or I talk to my siblings about it, and they would, or even before, like, around, like, 2014, 2015, my mom would tell my siblings, get out of the room, like, or don't talk about that in front of them. And I'm just like, or even I was talking to my sister, and I'm 28 and she's 21, and she was like, and, like, you can just see her posture and mood change. She was like, I understand you're talking about it, but it just makes me really uncomfortable. It makes me really sad, and they don't like to talk about it. And knowing, and so it just made me shut down. It was just better to just not do it that way. And so I was trying to find healing in all the other ways that I could, and putting myself into my work, and trying different types of school, and trying to help other people, just trying to figure out, how could I just help and make something better. So yeah, it was extremely lonely. And while it's a lot better now, and I'm in a place now where I've carved out and found community, and there are people, like, I have support groups for that are other women of color who are survivors of sexual assault. And that's the space I can go to, and I know I can talk. It may not be my family, and it may not be the community that that I was born into, but I had to come to terms with that. That support won't always look like your family, won't always look like that.
But it's good that you seek the help, you seek the help, and you knew when it was time to go ahead and get help, right? But my thing is that when I'm listening to you, when I'm hearing you, I'm like, do you know what love is? Do you know what love feels like? Because that's like one of the biggest things, right? Like, I speak to many women who say that now, since that happened, and it doesn't matter what age, you're trying to figure out what love is. You're trying to figure out how you can be in a relationship with someone. Because if they move too aggressively or they say something, right, it might trigger you. Even when you are on this healing journey and you're practicing and you're trying to get to a place where you feel comfortable, right? So, how do you navigate all of that? And do you know what love is? And how does this whole thing feel for you now? And you are an advocate at the same time, where you're healing and you're advocating. The fantastic thing is the way you heal is to advocate, is to get out there, share your voice, hear voices of other women, because it feeds you to continuously to move on in a journey, right? But personally, where are you right now? Can you accept love or have love from another person and believe that is genuine?
For the longest, and I think even sometimes now, it still is really hard for me to accept it in my mind. Like, and I've had so I had a boyfriend at the time. As soon as it happened, and I told him what happened, and I went back home. I came back, and I ended up staying in DC like when the semester got out for the winter, because I went to work and just make up the time and stuff that I lost. And I didn't have, so I wasn't, I couldn't afford to go back home. So I was like up here. I didn't have my family. I didn't know anyone in DC. The only person I had was my boyfriend, and we'd only been dating since like that August. So it wasn't a very, and I never had a boyfriend or dated anyone before. But when I tell you, I clung to him and stuck to him like glue, and like we got engaged. We had a son, and it was just like all this stuff. And we're not together. We haven't been together for about 7 or so years, 7 years or so, years now. And in retrospect, I look back and it's called trauma bonding.
Mhm.
Like, it's the people who are there for you, and especially like when you come from a place where love wasn't always centered and you didn't have genuine love to begin with, and you didn't love yourself to begin with, like, and things have happened to you that caused you not to really love yourself and really believe in yourself to begin with, and then you layer that with a trauma that kind of like that hits you at a developmental stage and kind of, throw the whole wrench into, your growth process. It can completely upend what that looks like. So I was with my ex-fiance, and I was like, he loves me, he's here for me, and I love him, you can't tell me anything. And I was so codependent on him, so like he would get angry with me or we would have an argument, and the moment that decibel rose, I was like, oh my God, I was falling apart, I was in pieces. And I was telling my therapist, she was like, Catherine, arguments are normal. And I'm like, no, but not this one. You didn't hear the way he was talking to me. And she was, and sometime later we were talking, she was like, I was really rooting for you guys, and I feel like he was there actually supportive for you, but the way you guys met and came together wasn't the type of space that you need to come. And there's no real chance for like genuine or like real true love to give that's not like trauma bonded, and here as a result of this trauma. And I've been in relationships, or a relationship after that, a romantic relationship, and even then, like, he would say I love you, and I say I love him. But then in my mind, I was like, no, you don't. He'd be like, I love you. I'd be like, oh, and I was like, no, you don't. And I would never say this. I would never say this. I was like, no, you don't. And you know what? I'll take it like relationships further. Like, I didn't believe it was anybody said it, and not
Yeah.
and I mean, of course, like, it's also an issue because like we never really said that growing up. Like, we didn't just say that in the household unless I was in
Yeah.
trouble. My mom was like, I love you, but I'm not gonna let you do this. Like, unless it was that. So, like, but to come back to it, even now I struggle with it. But what I will say, and what's completely changed for me, is I know that I deserve it, and I know like I'm worthy of it. Do I believe it when I see it and people are telling me that? No, but I'm like, you know what, you deserve this, Kathy. You deserve it, and you're worthy of it. But like 99% of the time, and then but when people say, I'm just like, no, because I'm not seeing them like, and it impacts your, and like, people always say like, oh, you love her, you do this, but like when somebody messes up one time or they hurt you, you just block them, cut them out completely. So
Mhm.
I like, you asked me like where I am in my healing. I help people all the time. I've had about 40 women and girls who like found me through Rain.
Yeah.
And they reach out and they're like, hey, like, I don't have anybody to talk to, I can't talk to my family, and like we have like weekly sessions, or I counsel them, and that happens, and they'll tell me like, hey, like, I'm not in a really good space, and I'm like, you know
Mhm.
what, you deserve to be here, you deserve love, keep pushing, like I'm hitting in every point in the book, and like they're good, they're okay. But there's sometimes, like a couple weeks ago, I was real, like, mentally I was touch and go, and like I didn't
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
myself. And so it's hard. And so it's like I said, it's constantly a line that you, a fence that you straddle constantly. And of course, and I'm still working towards getting to a place where my lows aren't that low, or whenever I feel, love, I'm at least open to it, even if it does come with hurt, or even, if it doesn't work out, I gave myself that chance because I know that I'm deserving of it. I gave myself that chance. So that's where I am.
That's what makes you genuine, right? And that's why I said I appreciated when I read your bio, because you're using the power of writing, journalism, to go ahead and speak, and that stuff lives forever,
Mm,
right? That stuff lives forever. So it's like it's a gift that was birthed out of you, right? And now you get to not only tell your story, but also tell the stories of other women who feel like they don't have a voice,
mhm,
who feel like they don't have anyone to talk to, who want to be able to help someone, but don't have the courage like you do to get out there and say it, write it, and speak it in front of people, and actually go ahead and say you can move on. But guess what? It's not all going to be good days,
mhm.
right? Some keep it to themselves their whole life and don't understand why they can't be in good relationships.
Yeah.
why their children are the way they are, why they shut down the way they do, because you have not addressed what happened to you, right? But the good thing is, like I said before, we have people like you, though, Catherine, right? For, look, I look at what was the blessing that came out of this, right?
Yeah.
And the blessing is that now you have somebody who's a voice to the people who feel like they are voiceless,
Mm.
right? You get to speak their stories, you get to advocate for them. And guess what? You get to have that empathy because it happened to you. So you're not that third party person that just sitting up there saying, uh-huh, uh-huh, wow, I can't imagine. It's like, no, I know
Hmm.
because it's still messing with me where I'm trying to figure out how to love, how to do all these things. But girl, this is what, I'm doing. I don't know if it'll work for you, but you could try it if you want to, or come to the support group. You know what I mean? So that's the thing that I love about, your story and the things that you're doing. So right now, with everything that you got going on, what are some of the things that you would say would be the best advice that you can give to women right now who feel like they don't have a voice? Like they've been holding it. Some of these women are 50, 55, Catherine, who never told anyone, and it happened to them when they was 8, 9, 10 years old.
Hmm.
What would you say to them?
Ooh, I've had a couple, like I've had women and girls of all ages, and what I found most with women, especially like older Black women, they don't. They feel like, well, one, if I didn't report, that means like if I didn't report, like it couldn't have been that serious, and it's because of course, like rape culture and all these external things that we hear that invalidate that, like we internalize and we don't even realize it, and then it makes you like, oh, well, I didn't tell anybody when this happened, or it was under these circumstances, so it doesn't count. But I know I still have these feelings as if I was violated, or that this thing happened to me. And the first thing I'll tell them, that those things that we tell ourselves, the excuses we use to invalidate what happened to us, whether it was something you were wearing or whether it was something you consumed, where you were, who you were with, like when it happened, if you reported or if you didn't, none of that matters. None of that matters. Whether you report or you don't, you were still victimized, you were still assaulted. And it's unfortunate, and it's this horrible thing that should never happen to you, but it did. And you are deserving of every support that we would give uh, a nun, a nun, and that's sober and complete. Like, and something happened to her, you deserve the same thing. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. If someone assaulted you, that's all that matters. It means you need support and you're deserving of them. I would tell them, and I tell them, and I really want to drive home that point or emphasize that point about reporting, because that so many people internalize that, especially like when it happened when they were little, they never told anybody. They think like, oh, I never told anybody and I was able to live and go on in life. I'm fine. Like I didn't need to tell anybody, but you may not need to report it, and you didn't may not have had the resources support you needed at the time, or knew you could report it, or maybe you were afraid of something, other repercussions if you did report. It doesn't matter. You can share what happened to you at any age, at any point in time, and you're still deserving of that support and those resources. And your voice, whether it's been silenced, whether it feels weak when it comes to this, or like even in general, whether it feels weak, whether it's been silenced, whether you've been told that it doesn't matter, whether you've been told that it's not worth it or you deserved it, and it's been thrown back up in your face whenever you try to use that voice, it's always there. It's always
Mm-hmm.
there. Of course, it gets beaten down and battered down and weighed down, and we struggle with trying to we struggle with trying to find it sometimes, but it's always there. They're like abs. Like, and you go through life, and like, we live and we eat good and we move on, and we don't always see them. They're always, it's always those muscles, they may be weak, they may take a little empowering, they may take some strength, and you may have to work it out. You may have to just tell yourself what happened first, and have a conversation with yourself. This happened to me. I was assaulted. It wasn't my fault. I don't care what the circumstances is, who it was, where it happened, what I was doing. It doesn't matter. This happened to me. And you start with having that conversation. You start working out little by little, and then you'll notice those ab muscles. You'll notice that voice. Okay, like I'm strong enough, or I'm prepared enough to have this conversation with myself. And then I can go to somebody, and I'm still in a space where I need support. And what happens is that you start to talk about it more, especially if you've not talked about it for a long time, and you feel like you've lost your voice. You'll notice that you found coping mechanisms you didn't even know you had to, and you didn't realize they were coping mechanisms, and then they'll start to become undone as you start to talk about it. Like you'll think you're okay, and then you go to a therapist, and then it's like a house episode where you walk in there and everything's fine, and then like 2-3 scenes later, it's you're in the ICU, and you're like, oh God, I just came to therapy for something else, because somebody passed away. Now I talked about this one thing, and the floodgates unopened, and that happens a lot. But like I said, you start, your voice is always there. Those abs, that muscle, that voice is always there. Start with having that conversation with yourself first. Start telling yourself, yes, this happened, and not invalidating yourself. Start there. That's the conversation that I had. And I will say in my healing, that's something I used to really struggle with. My mom, I would hear my mom say things like, we'd be watching Law and Order, and it'd be, maybe that person was a sex worker, or maybe that person was like that they were drunk at a party, or they were wearing like a short skirt. She was like, well, if you dress like that, you can't blame yourself for what happened. And I noticed myself like internalizing things even when I was little, and I would think the same things. But after what happened to me, like, and I would hear her say that, I'd be like, oh my God, it would just send me reeling. Like, and you start to internalize these things, and you realize that you can't. But so you have to start undoing those conversations with yourself. And like I said, you realize after you have the conversations with yourself, you often start to realize, hey, I need some more support. I need to get this out of my head and talk about it with somebody else. And you'll realize the other coping mechanisms that you had, they start to shift and become so unsettled. And when you go look out for support, you go find a support group, you go find somebody else, you go to your family or trusted people you can talk to, and you start having those conversations. It doesn't look like, oh, I want to find my voice, I just need to go to the police and report it right now, shout it from the rooftops. That's not everybody's ministry. Everybody's not able to do that. I don't recommend people just go from start to zero like that, especially when having no type of, you can't just like build them abs overnight. You try to do that, it's going to be a whole lot of work, and it's going to be real painful, and like just it's gradual. So start having that conversation with yourself. Your voice is always there. It's a muscle. You got to strengthen. You got to work it. Start with yourself. Find support that you can, that real support, even if it doesn't look like your family, even if it doesn't look like the support that wiped your butt when you was a baby, or know every other little thing about you. It's okay if that doesn't look like the community you were born to or the community that you're used to. You can find that voice in other people. And then the final thing I tell them is that, again, with that, not invalidating yourself and having to unlearn all the things we've internalized, especially in communities of color. What we've been told for the longest, women, Black women couldn't even report sexual assault. We couldn't, like what happened to us, we weren't, our bodies weren't our own, we weren't considered people. So how could someone sexually assault you? That same mindset has carried on and been passed down literally into our genes, but that same thing is there. And it takes a lot of unlearning. So it takes a lot of grace and patience and kindness with yourself, and also understanding that healing process won't ever stop. You'll realize that, oh, like I'm better. Like I realize, oh, I actually do deserve love. I may not feel it, may not believe it when I see it, and I'm working on that part. I'll get there.
That's right.
But I know I deserve it, and I know this way I've been feeling, I don't deserve this. I know, like, and it takes a while, or it can take some time. But you deserve community. Last thing, but you deserve community around you that supports that. Like, and I really want people to understand that. So many people think, well, if I can't go to, like, I tell my friend, I tell my spouse, I tell my parents that, if I can't talk to them, or I've heard the way they talk about other things, I know I won't be able to tell them. Sometimes don't even try. Like, if you know how they approach certain situations, if you heard how they were talking about like the R. Kelly and Bill Cosby situations, and it was like, and you were triggered or you felt off about that, I would not suggest setting yourself up to be hurt that way, but like really be open to the idea that no, you deserve community that supports you in that growth and in finding your voice. Sometimes, like I was just telling my professor, I sent her the card for this event, for this talk, and she was like, oh, I'm so glad you're loving yourself, because a couple of weeks ago I was in a really bad mental space, and I was like, well, I didn't come up with the name for the event. Like I said, I just want to tell you. She said, shut up. And then she sent me like a little smiley face. And like she knows, she's like, Katherine, please, I don't stop it. But then she sent me a smiley face right after that. So I know, like you, and she's my professor. Like I can't talk to my mom about this stuff, but this is a professor I met, years later. And like
Yeah.
I found community there. So yeah, that's what I would say. That long answer, but that's what I would say. Yeah.
No. So how can we follow you? How can we follow you?
Mhm.
How can the women connect with you if they want to be able to learn a little bit more?
Okay, so I'm not sure if I can like send it to you later, so, like to have it, or there's like a screen with everything on there.
Mhm.
But I'm on Instagram, and that's Katherine.Gilyard. I'm on Twitter, and that's K_Gilyard. I'm on TikTok, and I've actually started like a series for April, which is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Just literally at like letting people ask questions and answering them, and like they inbox me, and like I just post a question out there. So many people have questions. They want to support people. They don't know where to start.
Right,
But
right, right, right.
so I'm on TikTok. It's like at Katherine_not_cat. And then like I'm on LinkedIn, Katherine C. Gilyard. I'm not sure. And I'm on RAIN as well under the Speakers Bureau. And that links to my website and my direct email address. And like I said, and I have a Facebook group that's just full of women of color. And we're just a community that way. It's private, but I can send you the link and we can go from there. And I don't mind giving people my number to talk, just the whole space for people. So yeah, all those things.
Okay.
That's
Catherine,
it.
I think your voice is going to move mountains and change, people's lives where you're gonna be that voice for the voiceless. And I am so happy that you were able to just discover this piece of you where you are able to, really dig in and turn your pain into purpose, you know? And I know that sounds cliche, but you got to understand how much the world needs you because even though you're still struggling or you're still on your healing journey, it is so needed, right?
Mm.
And you just speaking up, just doing something that is so simple means so much. So I thank you for that. And I thank you for holding that space for women as well. And definitely send it to me, all of your social media handles, so we can put it in our chat and on our podcast so people can follow you. Okay.
Of course.
All right. I appreciate you. And thank you so much for coming on with us tonight.
All right, no problem. Thank you so much for having me again. And be safe, everyone out there. Talk soon.
All right. We'll talk soon.